We are on the Hayamad Aleph, I believe. We are up to the halacha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it, that David should be nichshal, even though he was a Kaddish, V'libi, Chal, B'kirbi, his Yitzhara was completely killed. Klal Yisrael, the Dardea, they were nichshal and Egel to teach us that no matter what matzav we're in, we can always do tshuva. I mentioned last night that it actually became very relevant. Like you think to yourself, where would you ever have a tzibur doing tshuva that it would be relevant? But it was very relevant after the Moranos started getting out of Spain. They were coming to Holland, and the Kehillas of Svardim that had moved and gave up everything that they had when the Inquisition was announced, they didn't even want to absorb those other people into their Kehillah, because they looked at them. You couldn't be Oymid B'Nisayin. You didn't give everything up to keep Yiddishkeit. Rather, you lived like Goyim for who knows how many years. We don't want you here. They themselves were all Chayiv Koros because they didn't have a mikveh, right? So they themselves were broken. You know, if we have Koros, what's the purpose of us coming back to Yiddishkeit? So they had to also be shown, maybe that's who this Gemara was for, to say, no, even you could do tshuva. Right? That's what prompted the reincarnation of the smicha, or the reestablishment of the smicha. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. The Hainu, the Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan. The Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan. I believe that's what the Bach sticks in. Yeah. Amaydich siv Nu'um David ben Yishai, U'Nu'um Hagever Hukam Ol. So the Gemara darshans it. Nu'um David ben Yishai shehekim oilo shel tshuva. He raised up the oil of tshuva to show that no matter what, no matter when, everybody could do tshuva. Zog the heilige Gemara weiter. V'amar Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Kol ha'oisem mitzvah achas ba'olam hazeh. If someone does a mitzvah achas ba'olam hazeh, and the Mefarshim tell us that stam mitzvah is referring to the mitzvah tzedakah. So kol ha'oisem mitzvah achas ba'olam hazeh, mikadmasoi v'hoileches lefanav la'olam haba. It comes, it precedes him, it guides him, it introduces him into olam haba. Shenemar v'halach lefanecha v'halach lefanecha tzidkecha. Your tzidkes will go in front of you, or if it means tzedakah, it's literally your tzedakah. V'chavod Hashem yasvecha, and therefore you'll be scooped up into the cover of Hashem. However, Rachman l'tzlan v'chalo iver avera achas, and stam avera achas is znus, milafaftoi, it wraps him around, umoilichasoi, and goes with him liyoim hadin, so he can't shake it off. Shenemar yilaftoi orchais darkam. Let me just look at the pasuk itself, so I read it the way it's supposed to be read. It's I can't even see what it says. The bigger, I don't know to see it. Yilafsu orchais darkam yalu batoyu v'yavedu. So it's very hard to shake off the avera. I'm assuming this is only if you didn't do tshuva. Okay. Rabbi Lazar Omer Kshura by Kakelev, it's attached to him like a dog. Like a dog will not let go of its master. It'll continue wanting to get close to its master. Shenemar Veloishama Eleha Lishkav Esla Liyais Ima. This is when Yosef was rejecting the advances of Eshes Petifar. Lishkav Esla Ba'olam Hazeh. That's what he rejected. So that Liyais Ima Ba'olam Haba, he knew that if he would be nichshel with her in Olam Hazeh, in Olam Haba, where he definitely wouldn't want her presence, she would have refused to let go of him. She would be right there. Imagine someone's in Olam Haba, and this Eshes Petifer is there saying, "Why don't you introduce me to your Rosh Hashiva? All of a sudden, you don't want me with you, right?" So they're very cling to you, like a mouse on a glue trap. Amar Belazar, Boyu v'nachzik toiva lavoisenu. We really have to appreciate our fathers, the Dor HaMidbar, the Dor HaEgel. Shel maloi hein loy chatu. If they wouldn't have done the Avera by Kabbalah Satira, anu loy banu lo'olam, we would never have even been created. And what does that mean? Just Anu loy banu lo'olam shahayu kamalachim v'loy halidi banim. At Matan Torah, Klal Yisrael reached such a high madrega, they were like malachim, and therefore they wouldn't have been childbearing anymore. Like a malach doesn't make children, that's what they would have been, and we would have never been born. So a mazel that they fell off that madrega, because otherwise we would never have existed. Tosfos asks, don't we say so what's the problem? It's noich lo adam shlo nivra. So Zok Tosfos hainu betchilas leidosoi she'ein yidua ma'yeh b'soifoi. Before you're born, it's not worth the risk. Avol kishu tzaddik, but if you end up being a tzaddik, ashra v'ashra yadar shu b'soichai. It's better to be born if you do the right things. So I always say it's not so bad getting old as long as you have what to show for it, right? So we don't have to be depressed when we get old. Shnemar Aniya Marti Elakim Atem. We said you're like Elakim, meaning you can't have children. But Chavaltem Aseichem. Your Maisim, the Egel, broke this, destroyed this Madrega, and now they have children. And therefore, Achein Ka'adam Temusim, the pasuk goes on and tell him saying we became like regular humans. Are you telling me that if it wasn't for the fact that the Yidden were nichshol with the Egel, there would have been no more Jewish children? No more children would have been born? But it says, Va'atem pru urevu. Didn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu give a mitzvah, pru urevu? I believe this by Noach, pru urevu v'shir tuvar urevuva. So obviously that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu built the world, that people have children. How could you say there would be no more children? Zog to Gemara, at Sinai. That mitzvah was until Sinai. But on Sinai, when we were going to become Kamalachim, there would have been no more children born. But Sinai namiksiv. Lech emor lahem, shuvu lachem lalechem. So what does it mean, shuvu lachem lalechem? Go back to your families and conceive. No, maybe it just means l'simchas oina. As Rashi teaches, l'simchas oina, she'ad ata nesar lahem al tikshu alisha. Now they could be with their wife, but it doesn't mean they would have children. In fact, it says l'man yitav lahem v'livneim. So clearly there's a reference made to the children. The pasuk says, "Mi'itin v'haya levavam zelahem liyur." I see that was in the midbar. After the Ma'aseh Egel. That's the pasuk that we quoted several times, talking about the Maila of the Dor Deah. So Zok to Gemara, so you see clearly there's going to be Levneim. Zok to Gemara, that doesn't mean there'll be new children born. It means it means those children that were already born by the time they had Maimon Har Sinai. So it says this. Let's look at the whole pasuk. The pasuk says, Zetoldos Adam v'yoim broi elakim Adam v'dmus elakim asa oisai. But if it's talking about Toldos Adam, so Pashas is talking about children being born. Frank the Gemara, what do you mean Sefer Toldos Adam? Was there a book there at the time? V'chi Sefer Hayaloi la'Adam Rishon? No. Rather, Malamid Sheheraloi HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'Adam Rishon, Dor v'Darsho. Every generation and those who darshan the Torah, Dor v'chachamim, each generation, and the chachamim of each generation. Dor uparnosov, each generation and its leaders. But kivon she'agia l'dor shel Rabbi Kiva, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reached the Dor of Rabbi Kiva, as he was showing Adam Arishon, the Dor of Rabbi Kiva, Sameach b'teirasai, Adam was very happy with the great depths of Torah that Rabbi Kiva reached, that we're soon going to see. Could be even Adam Arishon couldn't fathom. But he was very pained and saddened by the horrible death that Rabbi Kiva suffered. Amar, he said, "V'lima yakru reyecha," and the way that touch. Let's see if Rashi touches it. Rashi does not touch it, but there are those who learn "V'lima yakru reyecha." To me, the words of Rabbi Kiva are so high, they're yakar, they're unachievable for me, they're unattainable for me, they're too deep for me. That's one shot. The other shot is it's too painful for me to accept the death that Rabbi Kiva is going to go through. Is that what the article says? Adam is saying, your HaKadosh Baruch Hu's thought that Rabbi Kiva was able to fathom, he was not able to. Rabbi Yosy, Ein Bein David Ba, Mashiach will not come. There is a depository, a warehouse in Shemayim where HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps all of the neshamas that have not yet been assigned to a guf, to a life, and that's where he keeps all these neshamas. Mashiach won't come until all those neshamas are born. So the more children that are born, the faster Mashiach will come. I guess there's still a couple of virgins that have not yet been born yet. Shenemar ki loy la'olam oriv v'loy l'netzach exoif. Because Baruch says, I'm not going to fight with you, I'm not going to be angry with you forever. In other words, I'm not going to keep you in gullus forever. Ki ruach milafonoi yatoif u'neshamois ani asisi. I made these neshamois. So once again, you see that there's going to have to be birth, right? These neshamas have to be born. So how could you say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Klal Yisrael would not have had children up to that point? So loy tema onu loy banu lo'olam. Don't say, like we originally said, that if they wouldn't have been chayte, we have to be happy they were chayte, because if not, we would have never come to the world. It doesn't literally mean we would have never been born. They were on such a high madrega that our birth, our coming to the world would be irrelevant, because we wouldn't even scratch the surface of the high level that they had achieved. Let's see Rashi. There's a big storehouse in Shemaim, and it's called Guf. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all of the neshamas that were eventually going to be born throughout the entire world history, and they were placed in this Guf, and that's where they come from. That's where they come from when the new child is born. I will not prevent the gula. And this is derived from the Gemara. The neshamas in this warehouse, yatoif hu hama'acher. That means they're taking too long to be born, and that's what's delaying the gula. Then the Gemara answers, it doesn't literally mean that there would be no children born from the Eden who are on such a high madrega like Malachim at the time of the Kabbalah Slayer. Rather, it's Kamisha Loiban Loilam, Levisha Chaim Loilam. They would be living, they would live forever. They would have lived forever had they not been Chayte. If they're still around, we're not necessary. They're on a much higher madrega. That's what it means. But Avoda never means that we wouldn't be born. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. So now you're claiming that had the Eden not been chayte, but a ma'aseh ego, there would be no such thing as death. Is that true? Doesn't the Torah say about Yavamis? So obviously the Torah put into the Teva that there was going to be death. So how can you say there would be no more death? There's a whole rules of succession in the event that someone dies. Why are those halachos relevant? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that the Klal Yisrael would live forever, Zokt Gemara al Tanai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave all those halachas in the odd event of a water landing, in the odd event that maybe you might do an Avera. That's why because of that, there'll be death, nigzar on the world. That's why all these halachas were said. Do you have psukim and mitzvahs and halachas that are only based on some event in the future that may or may not happen? You find other examples of the same thing. The whole world was created based on Yom HaShishi. We had this a couple of days ago. When the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he created the whole world all atnai. On the Hashishi, on the 6th day of Sivan, that's also to be the day of Kabbalah Satira, Mutav, everything will be fine and dandy. If not, I will reduce the whole world to Iran. So you see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Tznoim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu put a Tnai as well. If death is nigzar on the world, then there'll be a mitzvah of Nachlois, then there'll be a mitzvah of Yavamis. Zog to Gemara, Meisvei. This is from a Bryson. The pasuk says, "Mi yitain v'haya levavam zelahem." This is the pasuk that we discussed quite a bit, where Kosh Baruch is saying, "Halavai," the lave of the Yidden on the Madrega that they were by Matan Torah should remain forever. Mi yitain v'haya levavam zelahem. The Bryce says, "Levatel malach hamaves efsher." You can't say that the hope was that these people shall always be around and they shouldn't be a malach hamaves. Shekvar nigzera gzera. The Brisa says there's already a Xera of Misa in the Veld. So the Brisa is clearly saying there's Misas in the Veld. So what does it mean? Allah kiblu Yisrael as a Torah ela kedei shaloi tehe uma v'loshin shalotis behen. That meat in Vaya Lavam is saying not that they're going to live forever, but they'll be in a situation where we will not be overruled and overcome and overpowered by other nations of the world. Shenemar lamanitav lahem v'levneim ad ha'olam. So Zokt Rashi, Haloi kiblu es haTorah, Haloi kiblu Yisrael es haTorah. Have shemei mikan. We could figure out from here. Shaloi kiblu lekabel schar hayoim ba'olam hazeh. Their schar isn't to be mekabel schar hayoim ba'olam hazeh. Rather by the rubbish, which they're going to die. Ela shaloi te'uma v'loshen shalatas behen v'zui toiva ksuva kan lamanitav lehem. Lamanitav lehem doesn't mean they're going to live forever. It means that they're not going to be under the thumb of the goyim. So you have a kloraraya, that Klal Yisrael will die. So this is like a checkmate. Till now we were deflecting the kashas, but this is an often a tana, an often a brisa that says there was always death, and there was never a havmina that we would be on touch a darga by Kabbalah Satorah that there would be no death. You're right. It's a machloikis tanoim as to whether or not at the time of the Kabbalah Satorah did Klal Yisrael reach a madrega where they would defy death. The Tanya Rabbi Yosy Omer loy kiblu Yisrael as a Torah ela kedei shelo yehi malach hamaves shoylet behen. So Rabbi Yosy is the one who holds that in fact at Kabbalah Satorah Klal Yisrael would not have been under the rule of the malach hamaves. So the Brayta we just quoted, in Echlami says there was never a time where Klal Yisrael would live forever. But Rabbi Yosy holds at Matan Torah that's what was supposed to happen. Like we darshan earlier on this Amid. But Chavalta Masechem, you did Averis, you were nishal in the Cheta Egel, and because of that, Achein Ka'odom Tamus. Isn't that Monday's Yom? Isn't this capital Monday's Yom? Isn't that Monday's Yom? If it is, it works out good. The Levian strikes again. Rabbi Yosy Nami, Taksiv L'man Yitav Lahem V'Levneim Ad Olam. Rabbi Yosy, who you're claiming holds that there would have been no misa if there wouldn't be for the Cheta Egel, it does say in the pasuk L'man Yitav V'Levneim Ad Olam. So you see that there always had to be children born. Zok to Gemara. Toivahu dahavya hamisa ika. It's mashur they Hashem would have been native with them, but that doesn't mean that they would necessarily have din misa. What's Tuesday? Okay, so I'm off by one day. I'm off by one day. Okay. You know, someone was saying that there's some shul in Israel where the Rav said the day of the Iranian attacks, he said there shouldn't be Tachnut day. Such a Yom of Simcha. So someone said, dear Mr. Trump, if you bombed him again, please make sure it's on a Monday or a Thursday. Zog to Gemara. Zog to Gemara weiter. Achein katem tu Rabbi Yosy Nami yaksiv l'manitav l'maveim adaylam. Gemara toiva hu da'ava mitzika. It's much that it would have been Misa. Zog to Gemara. Let me just see the Bach in Gimel. Hamisika Amar lach Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy would answer to that. Kivan the leka Misa. Ein lach toiva gedoyle misu. No, that is a toiva. The toiva is that there would have been no Misa. Frank the Marva Tanakama, who learned that there was Misa, Nami Yaksiv Achein Ka'adam Tamusim. So it's mashma that up until that point there was not going to be Misa. Gemara, my Misa in the use. What it means is Achein Ka'adam Tamusim. Avoda, you were always going to die. There was never such a havmina. But because of the Avera, now there will be the plague of Anius in the Veld. Damar Arba Chashuvim Kemesim. There are four types of people, that are considered like Kemesim. Eluhain. What are the four groups? Ani, a blind person. Ani, a poor person. Suma, a blind person. Umatzayra, and a Mitzayra. Umisha ein loibonim. I believe the Meshech Chochmah says, what's up is these four people are considered like Mesim. It's because they cannot give. And Ani can't give, he doesn't have what to give. Asuma can't give because he can't see. A Mitzayra is Bodad Yeshev, he can't interact with people, so he can't give. And Rechman told me, don't have children to give to. Life is giving. The pleasure of life is giving. Someone who could never give, it's Ke'ilu, he's not alive. Well, nowadays, Suma could be very much participating in life. In those days, the Suma was basically shut out. They couldn't really do much. This is talking, it's referring to Dosan and Avira. And the Pasuk said this is actually an interesting shtickle that Tosfos shares with us. Why? Because Baruch Hu you can go back to Mesu Kol Anashim Mavakshim Es Nafshecha. Meaning Dosan and Aviram, they died, and they were the ones who were pursuing your death. But Mesu, they didn't die. Mahavava, they were very much alive. Haraya, they were around by Yadas Korach, they were around for a while. Ella Sheyardu Menichseim. We know they lost their money. And Tosfos goes to a cheshbon. The only thing they could have done is Yardu Menichseim. Because they couldn't have possibly went blind, because it says Ha'ene Hanoshim Heim Tanakir. So clearly that's what they said. Are you going to blind us? They weren't blind. You can't say that they were Mitzrayim because they were in the Edom. You can't say that they didn't have children because what they were saying is that they don't have influence. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the lotion of what they said. They said so that's how we know they were alive. They couldn't have been Mitzrayim because they were in the Eidah, they're in the Machana, and you can't say that they didn't have children because the B'shvil Kach Lehoyu Pachos Kreivim Lamachos Lashina Kavetchila. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? They could no longer be Mashnu Kimesu Kol Anoshim. So what does it mean? They don't have children? That wouldn't be a reason why Harry wouldn't listen to them. So it must be that they lost their money, and because of that, they're no longer welcome. That an Anis Choshev Kamei. So we learned it from there because he says take everything and then it's as if you killed me. The Gemara learns it out of Dosan and Avira. Frank the Gemara Umi Mesu Mehava El Shodim Mechsem Suma Dechsev B'Machashakim Hashivani. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me in darkness. Kemei Se'olah Mitzar Dechsev Al Na Kitika Meis. We just had that by Miriam. Umishein Libanim Dechsev Hava Libanim B'Ayin Meis Anoichi. Rachel said that to Yaakov, right? Tanu Rabban, if you keep my hook, when it says im, Hashem doesn't just mean if you happen to. Hashem is saying, please listen to my Torah, and you find other places similarly where you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's begging Klal Yisrael, please listen to my Torah. Lu ami shemei, Halavai, my nation would listen to me, Kemat Oivei Machnia, then I would push down their Oiveim, their enemies. The Oimer Lu Hikshapta Lemitzvaisai Halavai, if they would have listened to my mitzvahs, Vahi Kenar Shleimacha, your Shalom would be like a river. Vahi Kechol Zaracha, your children would be like sand, V'tatzoi Meyecha, and your children. Taner Rabbanan, Mi Yitein, V'haya Levavim Zelahem, this is the same pasuk that we're dashing over and over again. Halavai Klal Yisrael would have that Madrega forever. Amar Len Moshe Yisrael, Kifuye Toiva, B'nei Kifuye Toiva. You, Klal Yisrael, are Kifuye Toiva, the children of Kifuye Toiva. It's in your DNA. Where do you see that? V'shah Shama Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu told Klal Yisrael, Mi Yitein V'haya Levavim Zeh Lahem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Halavai, you should be on such a Madrega. You know what Klal Yisrael should have answered? No, so put us on that Madrega. They should have told Hashem, we'd love to be on that Madrega. Haya Lahem Loimar, Tein Ata, we'd love to be. So that's one Kfiyas Toiv. Now, why is that Kfiyas Toiv? So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says, "V'cheinu oimer lu amishamei li shakadosh baruch hu mischanin lefneim sheyishmu zaTorah." No, that's weiter. I'm sorry, it's Tosus who says that. By not asking Hashem to make their hearts good, why are they Kfir Tova? They didn't want something good from Hashem. Kfir Tova means if someone does something good for you, you spit them in the face. They refuse to accept something from Hashem. Why does that make them Kfir Tova? So look at Tosus how he knows human nature. You know why? They were Kfir Tova, don't even do us a favor, because then we're going to owe you something. So they're a Kfir Tova, they didn't even want you to do them a favor because they didn't want to owe you something. How many times do we know people have such a thought? So that they're Kfir Tova there. And their Kfir Tova, they were denying the wonderful properties that the mon had. Now, Tosh asks, I don't understand something. They were Kfir Tova because it didn't say Teinata. Why do you have to bring a second example? So I think Tosh says, or it's out of the Masifta somewhere. I think Tosh says this no, it's not Tosh. He could have said, okay, that was a one-off thing. But if it happened twice, then that shows that it's really Kviyas Toiv. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, B'nei Kviyas Toiv. How do we know that they're from Kviyas Toiv? Because it says in the pasuk, Ha'isha asher nesate imodi. This already was in our DNA from Adam Arishon's time. Because who did Adam blame the eating of the Eitz Hadas on? Isha asher nesate imodi he nosna li mina eitz v'oich. Zok to Gemara, even Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was meramis to Klal Yisrael, that what they did was an avoda. The fact that they didn't say tain when the Kodesh Baruch Hu offered up an opportunity to be great, they didn't grab on it. Moshe didn't mention to them that this was a tviyah until much later, all the way at the end of their tenure in the Midbar. Moshe Rabbeinu lo Ram Shalom Yisrael elo acher aboim shana shenemar v'oilech eschem b'midbar aboim shana. And it says there in the pasuk, because you didn't ask for it. So even Moshe didn't acknowledge that this was a problem until 40 years later. Why didn't Moshe right away give them Musar and say, what are you talking about? Say Tain right away. A person does not appreciate and understand what its Rebbe is telling him. Moshe didn't even understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to say until 40 years. So Tosfos asks, here Moshe Rabbeinu was monning Klal Yisrael. If he himself didn't chap that they should have said 10 till 40 years later, why is it that he had a tefillah on Klal Yisrael? Why do they have to know any more than he does? So let's have a quick peek in Tosfos, which is on Omer Aleph. Tosfos says, Adar Bom Shnin like Inish, Pierce Rashi, Shaf Moshe Laniskar. Moshe himself didn't remember. Frank Tosfos him Timer and my cost Moshe al Yisrael, Agal Hugam Hulaniskar. How can you be angry at them for not asking for 40 years to have a heart that's subservient to their Rebbeinu Shalom if he himself didn't have that? The Yishleimer Shalafisha who loy hayitzarch litfilazu loy nosan leiv ad mem shana the kamad aitai de Rebbe. When something's not negated to you, there you need to have a special wisdom to understand the das of Hashem. Avol Yisrael shayitzrichim litfilazu. But if it's something that you need, that you should be able to figure out for yourself much faster. Moshe Rabbeinu was pure. He didn't need that label das. He had that label das. So now to understand the Kodesh Baruch Hu, to say that they should need it, that you need 40 years. But if they themselves are lacking, as they say, Yedish Shmoiger for Aim Tiger, right? They knew they were lacking, they should have asked. Repirish, a whole different shot. You know why? He was waiting for them on their own to be able to reach that madrega. He didn't want to push them. He was hoping they would say that. All those 40 years, he didn't think that they were being called for toiva. He just wanted to give them more time to come to that realization on their own that they should ask Hashem to bring them close. Once 40 years had already passed, and they still didn't chop. to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Sheroi Shoy Lahem Ladas. Then, Haven Aleim, Shemanichim B'Shvil Kfiyas Tova of Azochichim. After 40 years, he realized the reason why they didn't ask is because of Kfiyas Tova. They didn't want all HaKadosh Baruch Hu or something, and that's why he had a time on them. But as long as they didn't figure it out, he didn't call them out on it. Zog the Heilige Gemara weiter. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbana. Ma'idich said in the pasuk, Ashreichem Zoyrei al Kalmoyim. Lucky is those who plant in all different places, and this is referring to someone who does mitzvahs everywhere. Mishalchi Regel Ashar B'Chamor. Kosher Pshat of the pasuk is, if you plant everywhere, you're going to have a shar everywhere doing threshing to process the plants that you've grown, and the chamor to carry them and distribute them and bring them to your warehouses. Well, we're learning it. The Gemara is learning it in reference to mitzvahs. Ashreichem Yisrael, Bizman she'oshkim b'Torah u'v'gemilas chasadam, then Yitzra Masa b'yadam. They're in control of their Yetzer Hara, and therefore be'ein heim yisum b'yad Yitram, and Mishalchi Regel Ashar B'Chamor is basically telling the Yetzer Hara, take a hike. It's sending it away with the Shor Chamor. Shenemar Ashreichem Zeri al Kalmoyim vein Zriya al Tzedakah. Shenemar Ziru lachem al Tzedakah. Plant for yourself with tzedakah, v'kitzul v'chased, and you will harvest your investment with chesed. Ve'in mayim al Torah, shenemar havitzama l'chulamayim. So when it says ashreichem zori al kalmoyim, it says lucky is the one who does tzedakah and chesed and Torah. And what do you get for it? Mishalchei regel ashar b'chamor, meaning you'll be able to tell the Yetzer Hara, take a hike. Tanid ve'elio l'adam yosim adam atmoy al divrei Torah. Kishor la'oil, like an ox to a yoke, kechamor l'masvei. In other words, you should take on the yoke of Torah. It's going to serve you very well. Zok to Gemara, back to a little bit of Avoda Zara. Gimel yomim aser loses v'loses himoim. It's 3 days before the Avoda Zara. 3 days before already, you have to stop doing business with the goy or engaging in any of the other activities mentioned in the Mishnah. Frank the Gemara, umiba inin kula hai. Are you telling me 3 days before they're already preparing? You shouldn't need, we should only say a day before they prepare. How do you know this? But now we learned, Barba Parokim Bishana, the halach is, you're not allowed to shech. I'm sorry? So the Gemara is going to, this is very good. The Gemara is going to ask all these questions. But the Gemara says, we know there's a halach of Oisei Vespinoi. You're not allowed to shecht a mother and a child on the same day. So if someone is a behemoth merchant and he has a lot of customers and he's selling a lot of animals, if he sells a mother, he could sell the daughter same day, no problem. But if he has strong reason to believe that both of his customers intend to shech the animals that day, then he has to give notice. By the way, I already sold the mother. Or by the way, I already sold the daughter. So the person who does the second shechita shouldn't be nichshal in Oisei Vespina. So the Mishnah tells us, where we know the likelihood is the animal will be shechted today, I already sold the mother if he's selling the daughter second. Or if he's selling the mother second. The Elohen, which days could you assume that there will be a shechita that day? Erev Yom Tov v'Achan Shulchan. Erev, the second days of Yom Tov, because it's a Yom Tov and Atzmoi. Rashi says, Yom HaShlomas Karbonos. Before we should talk about it, how come not the first day? The first day we say people are turd with their Arbaminим, they're not focused on the Suda. Erev Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, everyone's preparing for Pesach. The Erev Atzeres, Erev Shavuos, the Erev Rosh Hashanah. Uchadiv Rabbi Yosy Aglili af Erev Yom Kippurim Begalil, because they had Sudas on Erev Yom Kippur, as Rashi says, how you regilin laharboy simcha yoser. Zok Rashi, Katani Bias, Erev Yom Tov. Why don't you need to worry 3 days before they're going to be shechting it for Yom Tov? Elamai, when people are preparing meat, they only prepare a day before. So if they're not buying animals until 1 day before, what's the problem with selling goyim 3 days before? If he sold animal yesterday, he wouldn't have had to tell them I sold the mother today or the daughter today. Nobody buys animals 3 days in advance. So why the goyim is that way? So when we're talking about them buying these animals to eat themselves, they only need 1 day. But Here it's a question of a krava. The goyim are being makar them to their avodah zara. Be'inan klasa yomi. They need 3 days to prepare this animal. Ula krava. Sagi betlasa yomi. If it's for a krava, frank the Gemara like Dubi asks, you need more than that. The Tanya shay alan beilchas of Pesach. Koydem at Pesach shloishim yoim. And we always thought, because it applies nowadays also, Tosfos mentions, but that's because it takes 30 days to check your animal properly. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Shtei Shabbos is only 2 weeks. And the reason would be is because you want to check your animals. So look what Tosfos says. The Tosfos were transitions from the skinny lines to the wide lines. But now in Shalom Bechaz Pesach, V'avu b'shegam ato she'ein carbon. We still are shayalam behilchas Pesach chodim lamed yom. Mikamakim ikarat takana is ala carbon nisak. The main reason why there's 30 days before Yom Tov for preparation is because of the carbon that we bring. Kita amar time of perkamet apsochim. Shoynavi oimed bepesach rishon umazer al Pesach sheni. It's always about the carbon. So Zok to Gemara. So you need 30 days. So if you need 30 days, why is 3 days enough by the avodah zaros? Zok to Gemara. Anam d'shchichi mumen. We have many more mumen that passel on the animal to be brought as a carbon. The pasli afilu bedukin shabayin. Even a subtle mum, like a little scratch on the eye, will render an animal to be a bal mum, and you can't use it. So beinin tlos and yoimin, you need more time to check out this animal. Inu de mechus rever, goyim who are only prohibited to bring in a carbon if it's mechus rever, which we learned from Noach. So zogdim aforshim, the same way they used to be noyik to bring karbanos when they switched over to do avodah zara, they still maintained the same standards that they did when they were serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Look at Rashi. The Osher Livnei Noach lahakriv v'legavoya v'dumyu de karbanoi shenohagu avoiseinu l'shamayim heinoi hagin la'avodah k'chavim shalahem. I read it avoiseinu because the Tziyonim changed the girsa. But without it, is avoisayam, meaning their fathers would bring karbanos, but the Shamayim, they had standards. Those are the same standards that they will maintain bringing animals for their avodah zara. So therefore, islu b'klasa yami sagi. They're only concerned about mechusar ever. 3 days is enough. The Amar Balazar minayin mechusar ever. The also livnei noyach. How do you know a ben noyach is not even allowed to bring a mechusar ever? So carbon dechsev umikol achai, and this is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Noach what animals to load into the teva because he would need them for karbanos, as Rashi says, al shem shoyu osid Noach lahakriv mehem. The animals that Noach brought into the teva, he was eventually going to use for karbanos. It says mikol achai, mikol basar, shnai mikol, and it says mikol achai. Amr Torah have behema shechayin rashe evarim shalom. You have to bring animals that have all of their evarim, and therefore we see that a ben Noach doesn't have to be makbid on subtle things like dukin shaba'ayin, but he does have to be concerned about missing Rashay Evar. Zok to Gemara, that Mikol Achai, we don't use to tell you the halacha of Rashay Evarim. Hami Boile, we need that for something else, Lamute Treifa, Deloy, to tell you that you're not allowed to bring an animal that's Treifa for our carbon. Zok to Gemara, no, Treifa, there's another pasuk that says, Milichya Zera Nafka. So let's just look at these two psukim inside so that we should know what we're talking about. It says, let me see if I can find it. To Mikol Achai, Mikol Basar, Shnai Mikol, Tovi Elateva, Lahach Yositach, Zachon Keviyu. So we have Mikol Achai here. Then we have another pasuk, Game Oifa Shemayim, Shiva Shiva Zachon Keva, Lechayoy Zera. From Lechayoy Zera, Zokt the Gemara, that's where we would know that it can't be a treifa. If you hold the treifa is any ledas, L'chayei zera means you should take animals that could produce other animals that could reproduce. So if you hold that a treifa cannot reproduce, so then I would understand how from l'chayei zera you see that the animal cannot be a treifa. Ella, if you hold if you hold an animal that's treifa could give birth, so how do you see from the chayei zera that it can't be treifa? So elamai, it must be from the hachiyos, from the first pasuk. So how do you know Rashi Evarim? Michael Memer. There's a third pasuk that says itcha. it says itcha b'doimin l'cha. So what's the lashon pasuk? Mikol chai, mikol basar, shnayim mikol tavi el ateva lachis itach. It says itach, with you. The animals have to be similar to you, just like you're not a treifa. So too the animals that you would bring into the table that you're going to need for karbonis shouldn't be treifas. Who said v'dilma noach gufei treifa? How do you know Noach wasn't a treifa? Right? So Toshus asks, what do you mean? He lived. We know he lived. So we'll get to it in a second. V'dilma noach gufei treifa. Gemara, Tamim Ksivbe. He says Noach was an ish Tamim. He was complete. Gemara, v'dilma Tamim b'drachav hoya. Maybe it means Tamim doesn't mean he was physically completely healthy. Maybe it means he was a tzaddik. So tzaddik ksivbe. It says he was a tzaddik already. So Gemara, no, Dilma Tamim is b'drachav. Rashi says in his mannerisms, onav shval ruach, and tzaddik b'ma'asav means he didn't do chamas. Maybe that's what it means. Gemara lo yisol kedaitach. The Noach gufei treifa hava. It doesn't make sense to say that Noach was a treifa. Why? The yisol kedaitach, the Noach treifa hava. If Noach was a treifa, and you're going to tell me when it says lahachir is itach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying bring animals similar to you, Amalei Rachman Kavosach Ayil, Shalman Loy Ta'ayil. What do you think HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have told him only bring treifas, don't bring Shalman? That doesn't make sense. So it must be he was a Shalem, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling him to bring complete animals. Okay, so now we have the problem is, how do you know that Noach was not a treifa? Maybe he was also a treifa. How do we know that he wasn't? So the teretz is, so the Gemara asked that question, but the problem is, what do you mean? Noach couldn't have been a treifa. He survived the Mabul. So you see, he didn't die right away. So let's look at Toysus, or the small Toysus. The Dilma Noach Gufei Treifa Haba, it's the third Toysus on the Vavam at Aleph. Frek the Gemara, Frek Toysus, the Afal Gav Shechai La'acher Mikan Shonim Rabbis. Noach lived many more years after the Mabul, so he could not have possibly been a Treifa. Mikamaka in Ba'isa Shah Lo Haya Yodea Im Haya Treifa Oiloi Oishalom. He didn't know at the time. So lahaki yisitach, at that time he would have had to be aware of whether or not he's supposed to bring treifos or non-treifos. But he didn't know at the time what the future would bring. She'aniach milavi treifa mitam doimila. But lo near tiritza. Tells you I don't like this teretz. The al karchach lo yisiru ella mitreifos agoli v'nikr. That's not a kasha Noach wouldn't have known, because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling him only take non-treifos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't be telling Noach, don't take an animal that has a hidden treifa, like a hole in the lung, that he couldn't have known. How could he have known that? That couldn't have been what Hashem was talking about. Hashem was talking about obviously an animal that was hacked of sticker, that it would be obvious that it would be a treifa. That Noach would have known about himself as well. How could he expect Noach to know what's going on inside an animal? He didn't have extra vision. At this point in the Gemara, maybe the Gemara holds a treifa chaya. There are those who hold an animal could be a treifa, yet it will still live for an extended period of time. The Kusavar, treifa chaya, teda, the kayamin, because he lived. All right, we're also going according to the Mandamot treifa ledes, because that was the Gemara's kasha. If you hold treifa ledes, how do you see Malach Zara? So if we hold treifa kayamin, if you hold treifa ledes, maybe you also hold at this point treifa kayamin, ulidei treifa namin chaya. We'll stop here. We'll tomorrow.